is not a drone, because it's the world's first graduation cap to actually fly. And I engineered it because I had the honor to give the MIT commencement speech for 2023, which basically means I had a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to share the most important advice that I've learned through life.
And try to remember, if someone cuts you off on the freeway, maybe they're not out to get you, maybe they just have diarrhea.
And just when they thought I was wrapping up,
anybody can toss their hat in the air. We see it at every graduation, but few have dared to make it actually fly. Congratulations, MIT class of 2023. You totally got this.